All right. Good morning or good day, good afternoon, depending on where in the world you are. Welcome to a rainy and windy Blacksburg, Virginia. My name is Benny Foreman. I'm the business development manager here at Inmotion US. And as a quick background, I have been with Inmotion since 2001. Time flies. It doesn't feel that long, but apparently it is. I was first with Inmotion over in Sweden, and then since 2005 here in Virginia. So let's move into the presentation. And my very first slide is that very important disclaimer. I have not had access to any crystal ball. And as I think I said during the presentation I had yesterday, when it comes to, when it comes to my predictions, it's important to keep in mind that my dear wife would certainly tell you that I am wrong most of the time. So keep that in mind. The question that was asked here was to look at battery electric, hybrid, or fuel cells. Is one of them going to be the winning technology? And starting with the battery electric here, it's no coincidence that I selected a background with the forklifts, because when it comes to industrial machines and vehicles that are battery electric, forklifts have by far been the largest and most common application of battery electric. And they've been around forever. There's definitely a lot of technology advancements in that space, but it's a fairly mature application where most of the growth is just coming from GDP growth plus the ever-growing online purchasing and the additional material handling requirements that comes in that space. But for a lot of other applications, there are a few things that have changed the market space. I listened in on a good panel discussion yesterday about battery technologies and so on. And I think that the battery technology advancements have had very strong impact on making things viable. The improved performance of the batteries in terms of how much you can discharge and charge them, just the power density of the batteries have been improving tremendously. Life is a very important thing. I mean, it's not too long ago. If we look back 15 years, maybe one of the most important things that we were always looking at in every battery-powered application was, just how many cycles can you expect from the battery, and what is the memory effect of the battery? Do you really have to discharge it fully before you can charge it back up again? A lot of these things affecting life today. A lot of battery suppliers have come to a point where you have extremely reliable, long-lasting batteries. Weight is coming down to the point where you have a lot of perfectly usable handheld things, and cost is coming down, making battery powered equipment perfectly feasible also from a cost perspective. Then I had a couple of bullets here. I think that one additional really important factor that is behind why the electric revolution is happening right now it's really around the perception of the end user, and a couple of things that are affecting this. One is where the electric tools have moved from being just toys to being perfectly usable. I just look at my own experiences, and 10 years ago, you bought the battery electric tool, whatever it was, and it was sort of, yeah, you could use it maybe a little bit if really the requirements weren't too bad. But whenever you needed to do something real, you had to go to a gas powered tool or something that you plugged into the wall. Today, I got rid of most of my gas powered tools, and definitely of the corded electric tools, and mostly everything is electric. And I had to include a little prop for an electric chainsaw, just because I recently bought one because I needed to do some more serious yard work, and I thought that this was sort of about right. And my expectations were still low, and you start using it, and you're like, well, but actually this one works great. So the whole electric portion that people think about has sort of moved from being a toy to being something that works really well and is quite providing a good user experience. And you have what I would call the Tesla effect. And I was just picking two pictures showing sort of how far we have come when it comes to electric cars. There's a mid-1970s Vanguard city car, which is what electric cars used to be. And today you have these all-electric supercars that no one can ever afford, but we can all sort of dream about at least trying them. So the battery electric applications have moved from being something that was pretty useless to something that is absolutely usable and desirable. So I think that is really driving a lot of the conversion into battery electric machinery at this time, that the end market for these machines are receptive to it and understanding the benefits that you can get. There are obviously still some challenges around battery electric, meaning that it's not the right solution for every application. And in the passenger car world, there's been talk about this range anxiety, and you can translate that also into machinery, even if range then isn't about moving a certain distance. In the case of my chainsaw, okay, it's really how many cuts can I make on one of these small battery packs. And in that case, I'm solving it by actually having multiple battery packs. and where the charging time on each battery pack then is shorter than the time it takes for me to use the available energy in one of the batteries. So how to say, it's solved by the swappable batteries. In some of the other machinery that you will look at, maybe that's not really a realistic approach, and it comes down to how many hours of actual operating time will this machine see in a day, and does it make sense to have it electric or not, and at what point does the battery become physically too large and economically too expensive to justify that solution. And it's also then tied a bit to the charging infrastructure and the time it will take you to charge, both the time and the availability. And I'll give one example. In many ways, you would, this is just a personal opinion. I'm sure that there are people who knows these things better than me and will have other answers. But I look at the question about electric school buses and how big conversion we can think there. In many ways, it looks like the ideal application because they are used for a very short period of time. They have a very defined route. The environmental aspect of it is important to all of us when we have children standing outside waiting for these buses and riding in them and all of these things. So, but at least here in the US, one of the big challenges that I would assume is just, okay, so how do you charge them? You bring all these fleets of school buses back to a large school parking lot, but there are no chargers available and there's no electric infrastructure to bring enough power in to put up a lot of chargers at that particular location. And if the bus drivers, as in many cases, bring the buses home between the morning and afternoon runs, also the homes typically would not have enough electric power to effectively power a large charger that can charge the bus battery. So there's definitely some challenges, but for a lot of applications, you can today fit a compact, cost-effective battery that meets the needs of most users. And just as an example, I put one picture in here of two of the fairly newly released Volvo. It's a compact loader and an excavator, and these are full battery electric machines. Interestingly enough, operating on just a 48 volt system, because you can get more than enough power out of the 48 volt system to meet all the power requirements on these machines. So yes, battery electrics are growing very rapidly, but there are challenges that makes it that it's not a solution that fits every user and every application. So then moving over to hybrids. Hybrids is really nothing new, and I doing just one. You can go back all the way to the Porsche hybrid from the 1800s. There, it's been around. I was using one example where the Inmotion Sweden business was involved in a project together with Scania back in the early to mid 90s, developing hybrid drive systems for transit buses. And I used to joke about the fact that this particular bus in the picture actually already 20 years ago, it was sitting as an exhibit in the Stockholm Museum of Public Transportation. So already at that time, it was a museum piece. Now, and then I had a couple of other examples of machineries that have been produced for quite a long time with hybrid drivetrains. One of these is a floor scrubber. One is a golf course greens mower that have been available with a hybrid drivetrain for a long time. Still, the same discussion about the battery technology advancements that was important for the battery electric vehicles are impacting also the viability of hybrid solutions, because these benefits in performance, life, weight, cost all also benefit the hybrid solutions. I think that the hybrid solutions, when I talked earlier about the perception of the end users, the hybrids may have had a slightly more mixed impact of what we can then call the Prius effect. On the Tesla effect, on the battery-powered side, it's an almost universally positive impression. This is really desirable. It's high performance. It's great. On the Prius effect, well, in most people's minds, that was purely a fuel economy play. I didn't necessarily agree. I was actually one of the few people who were driving the first generation Prius, that really frumpy looking thing that Toyota didn't want to sell too many of. And of course, fuel economy was impressive, but I was kind of more impressed by the overall refinement of the drive system, the smoothness and the quietness and all of this. But in the minds of people, it was really, okay, hybrid is about fuel economy. And when you look at most industrial applications, people may talk about fuel economy, but at the end of the day, I have to say, we haven't seen where the fuel economy has really created a market in this space. And I think I found out, sort of being out working with end users who are operating the machines, in many cases, they won't even know what the fuel economy is, because you're not looking at it as a miles per gallon. You are just refueling the machines when you need it, which is also, I think, reasons why you see a lot of machines sitting idling at workstations and workspaces, because the workers who are using the machines aren't particularly concerned about the fuel economy. I can just leave it idling so I don't have to start it up again when I need to move it. But I think there's a movement where also on the hybrid space, performance is becoming a more important aspect of it. What kind of features and what level of performance can you create with a hybrid system. And I'm looking at things like engine downsizing and improved responsiveness as things that people will become used to and eventually start demanding. In a presentation yesterday, I was doing a pitch for hybrid wood chippers. That's an example of an application where I think the hybrid solutions are absolutely ideal, where the electric motor will provide the torque support that the IC engine can never create on its own. And it will create also it will solve the problem with the very slow responsiveness. Today you have this giant flywheel, and once you lose RPM on the IC engine, feels like it takes forever to get the engine up to speed again. So there are a lot of these applications where I think a correctly executed hybrid system will so significantly outperform the IC engine system that eventually the IC powered solution will only be this sort of really cheap solution that you only buy if you really don't care about. So in terms of I know that there's been a lot of discussions around, so is hybrid just a stopgap on the road to the full electric, or is it really a long-term winner? I think it's a mix of that. I mean, of course, the battery technologies will continue to advance. You will continue to get more and more usable range, if we call it, for the battery powered solutions. But I think that we will see hybridization having a large and important role in the market space. I think that there will be varying degrees of hybridization. It may not be that the electric power in the hybrid applications are, completely powering the machine. But over time, I still think we can expect that IC engines without some degree of electric hybrid power will become rare. I think, the opportunity to downsize the engines and to provide the additional responsiveness and torque with electric power will, it's a, too good solution not to employ. And the third piece here to be discussed was the fuel cells. And now you recognize I moved back to the forklifts, and there's probably an even greater reason to show a forklift when you talk about fuel cells. The first question I was asking here is then there's been this sort of evil comment around fuel cells, that fuel cells is a great technology that is always 10 years away from market implementation. So is that true? I would say no. I would say fuel cells are already here for niche applications. You have companies like, I'll just give one example, Plug Power, that provides fuel cells systems to large forklift fleet applications in these giant distribution center environments. So these are environments where you have a large local fleet of forklifts. You run the facility 24/7. You value not having to take the forklifts out of operation to go swapping out the batteries at regular time. So in this case, you have these fleets that you can really run all the machines at all times, just because the refueling of the fuel cell is so quick compared to the battery replacement. There are reasons why this is becoming more and more popular. There has been significant advancements in the fuel cell area of the reliability and uptime and the performance in terms of how much current you're getting from the fuel cell. But as I was mentioning earlier about the Tesla effect and the Prius effect, then I'm asking myself, well, for fuel cells, are we seeing the Mirai effect? And I think in some ways, maybe we do, because I don't know about you, but I definitely know for myself, I have never seen one. They are so rare that they only exist in maybe certain locations. I don't know, San Francisco, if you live there, maybe you see one. But at least here in Virginia or on all my travels, I don't think I've ever seen one out on the road. And it's probably a little bit the same with fuel cells, that it's still so rare and so specialized applications that we are not really seeing it in terms of a widespread adoption, and something that the end market is embracing. And obviously, one significant challenge on the fuel cell side is just that there is really still no significant hydrogen infrastructure. So even if you were to get one of these Mirai, how can you use it when you can't find any place to fuel it? So that infrastructure portion, it works when you have a particular fleet in a location that is large enough to justify investing also in that hydrogen infrastructure for that particular location. But it gets really difficult to do on a widespread adoption perspective. And then just one little comment. I remember a comment that must have been, I don't know, 15 years ago, but one person who was very much involved in the fuel cell industry and so on. And he had the thoughts around saying, well, at least from his perspective, he assumed that, well, probably we'll see fuel cells in our homes and factories first, because it's a relatively speaking, it's easier to put the fuel cell into a very stable and controlled environment where, you know, the temperature is easy and there's no shocks and vibrations and things like that. So you can put it in and you have a generally fairly stable load in terms of how much electricity you're consuming and all of that. So in terms of general adoption into the industrial vehicles, not so much. We'll see it again in these large fleet applications at particular locations, but not really for the single machine that is out there operating somewhere. So will one be the winning technology, or will they work in parallel? And I'm sort of bailing on the question by starting with the opposite. So what loses? And I think that the answer is relatively clear. IC engines are losing, not from the perspective that they will disappear, but they are already quickly losing share, and they are also becoming increasingly complex and costly and more difficult in a sense to maintain and service from a long-term perspective, just due to all the additional emissions requirements that go on these engines. And I think that the increasing expectations that we as users have on the engines in terms of power, responsiveness, low noise, all these things are putting the IC engines more and more at a disadvantage. I don't think that there is an answer to what wins. I think that my answer would be diversity wins. Paraphrasing the old quote about the Ford Model T, you can have any color you want as long as it's black. I don't think that that's going to be the future of the industrial machines when it comes to the to what's powering the machine. I think there will be an optimization that is based on the needs of the user. So the operator or the owner and operator of a particular machine will look at, this is my use case. This is how many hours per day I'm running the machine. This is the place that I'm running it at. This is what infrastructure is available to me, and I will buy the machine that fits my needs. I think we will see diversification within individual fleets, and this one is kind of interesting. One thing that was said that sort of stayed with me was in discussing electrification in different markets, because obviously if we look at Europe, for example, we have high energy costs, we have a lot of a much higher degree of environmental concern. So the expectation has always been that sort of electrification will happen first there and then sort of gradually move over the globe. But one person that had an interesting perspective of it was saying, well, but US is really also interesting for electrification, and perhaps we will actually see a quicker initial adoption here in the US, just because here we have very, very large fleet owners that own thousands of machines or thousands of vehicles, whether it's these very largest construction companies or whether it's the large trucking companies. They don't, in Europe, you have a much more diversified base of machine owners or vehicle owners that, you know, own one truck or 3 trucks or some really small numbers. And when you do that, you have to, each machine and each truck or each bus needs to be flexible enough to cover all of your needs. Here in the US, the thought that this person had was saying, a fleet owner that owns 2,000 trucks, there's nothing that says that they couldn't have 200 of them being electric already today, because they can easily diversify their fleet and use these machines for the applications where they fit. And then I was adding a final more question, because it's something that has been asked, and I think by several customers, and I think it's a really interesting one. So how can small OEM meet these diversification needs? Because especially in the off-highway space, you have so many OEM that will maybe build 50 machines a year, if even that. And if you're in that kind of scale, how can you diversify? And probably you can't. I think that the best answer we've been coming up with in these discussions is it might really be that these OEMs really have to find their specific niche and do that niche really well. And then because of that, pick one of these paths, whether it's staying with IC, whether it's battery electric, whether it's hybrid, probably not fuel cells if you're too small, just because if you're that small, you're never going to be in those really large scale fleet applications where the fuel cell makes most sense. So I didn't use the entire hour, but perhaps there are questions.
Hi, Benny. Thanks for a good presentation. Yes, we have some questions from the floor here. First question is, if you compare the cost between the solutions, what would you say is the most kind of cost-efficient solution?
I don't think that you can answer that in a generic way, because again, it really depends on the application and the duty cycle. If you can stay within a reasonably sized battery pack, for sure, a pure electric battery electric solution is going to be cost effective. But if you would look at, say, long haul trucking, for example, that's not going to be a cost effective solution in that application, just because your battery would have to be too large. It would take up too much space of your load capacity, and it would just the cost of the battery and the charging and all of that would be prohibitive. So I'm deflecting.
I can hear that.
Answering the question,
yeah.
but I in a lot of cases, the battery electric solution will be really cost effective, and I think fairly soon being cost effective, even cost neutral to an pure IC solution.
Okay. We have another question here from Eduardo saying, if most of us agree to spread out the electrification in our vehicles, not only because mode or fashion reasons, but economical and environmental. In your opinion, what is stopping all car makers to focus on these new technologies and not continue to developing the fossil fuel cars? So,
well, I'll go back to my comment saying I think it will be relatively rare to see pure IC engine, whether it's cars or industrial machines. I think we will see a level of some level of electrification on every machine. But I still think that our user needs are too different to allow for a 100% battery electric future. It would be nice if it was, but I'm looking at myself here in Blacksburg. If I'm to travel somewhere, my choices are either to go by car or to fly. And if I'm to fly, I need to drive either to Charlotte or to Washington, D.C. to find a major airport. And I definitely can't make it both there and back on a battery pack unless I would afford something like a Lucid Air or something. So I suspect that the IC engines will be with us for the foreseeable future, but I'm expecting smaller and smaller IC engines and more electrification.
in some markets, I can take the comparison here in Sweden. More than 50% of vehicles sold in the pass car segment was in December last year was fully battery electrical vehicles. With that kind of change in the market, we have another question from the floor saying that you need to pick only one of the three that you presented. Stick to that one. But what's your prediction in the next 10 years? Is it a battery electric, hybrid, or fuel cell that would be the dominating?
In terms of cars, if we stay on that area and sort of, then I expect some level of hybridization on almost everything, and I think at least from a U.S. perspective, that's what I think we'll see much more of.
Yeah.
In terms of different types of machinery, I do expect more and more battery electric. So if you talk 10 years from now, I think we see a lot of battery electric, because there's so much of these types of machines that are not run on a 24/7 operation. You have very limited periods of usage during a day. I don't know.
Yeah,
you look
just
at
a few hours.
Yeah, and those will absolutely go battery electric. Yes.
And we have time for a few more questions. So one of them, if you were to pick one, do you think the market demand, or in terms of applications, so it's more customer driven, or would it be legislative driven to drive towards the decarbonization of the world and the applications herein?
I think they go hand in hand, because I think that legislation is rarely successful at before it's acceptable by the public.
Mm.
You can't. It doesn't work well for politicians to make decisions that are sort of hated by the end user. But when there's enough acceptance by the public saying, yeah, we will have to do this, then the legislation gets accepted and survives more than one election. So, we see these things playing out right now in California with the ban of small IC engines for outdoor power equipment. They are working on a ban for IC forklifts. And these are things that probably are going to be successful because they are now generally accepted. If this had happened 10 years ago, it would not have been accepted because people would not have believed that they can do this.
So basically, the products are now available, so we can start the shift to battery electric and the decarbonization at scale as well. So looking at we have a question from Europe here. Roberto is asking, do you have any government incentives in US to purchase BEVs?
There are government incentives in the private sector. So there are tax credits for electric and plug-in hybrid cars, for example. There are significant tax credits for electric and hybrid buses and on trucks and things. So there's a lot of different incentives, both on a federal and a state level, but it's also all fairly complex to navigate this. And it's complex to understand, how is this really impacting the financials of your decision. So there's definitely improvements to be done at making these initiatives more transparent and more understandable to the users.
Thank you. And this is going to be the last question, because I know that you have a panel session that you need to jump and prepare starting in 12 minutes. So, but we have time for one last question from Marco, asking about if the plug-in hybrids cars are not gaining market share due to cost. Is that do you think that is the case, or there may be other factors that are limiting the growth of the hybrid cars?
Well, from a US perspective, I think
that was a tricky question. I can say that.
No. I mean, there is a cost disadvantage, but I also think that most people are not yet aware of the performance benefits because they've never experienced it. They don't know of the torque benefit of the electric support, and they don't know of how nice it is to have the quiet car in your in-city driving. So I'm thinking that it's more it's more of a time question than a price question right now.
So maybe
The price, the price difference, if the car is 45,000 for a conventional or 50,000 for a plug-in hybrid, and I mean, these are sort of expensive things, but that difference isn't going to make that.
Great. Thanks for an excellent presentation, Benny. We really enjoyed that. We're getting good feedback from the audience here as well. So thank you very much for this presentation and your engaging presentation. So you need to jump off for the next session. So.
And someone with a better crystal ball than mine would be very happy to. I would be very happy to get input and feedback from people who have other perspectives than what I have shared. So, thank you all who have listened in.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.